Today on Connecticut Yankee Sanity, we'll talk about Elizabeth Warren, who wants to be president. I won't rehash her Indian heritage claims except to say that a Cherokee squaw known today as Nancy Ward would have been a better match than Pocahontas. Legend has it that at age 17, Ward earned the title War Woman when she took up her husband's rifle after he was killed in a Cherokee land grab operation against the Muskogee Creek Indians. Afterwards, Ward sat in on councils with the big chiefs. That sounds more like Mrs. Warren's MO to me. It's too late now, but she might have been better off leaving the Indian maiden tale out of her career toolbox. According to the blonde haired, blue eyed senator's DNA report, her connection to the Cherokees is at best historically and genetically remote, and none too credible. Meanwhile, I'd suggest we owe the real Pocahontas an apology. You'd never guess it, but Elizabeth Warren is a former registered Republican. I suspect that explains her present far left militancy. She wants there to be no doubt about her wholehearted conversion. At the moment, according to most polls, she ranks third nationally in the Democratic primaries. Let's review a few of her campaign positions to see how she got there. Item. Without being specific, she foresees that our economy is about to crash, and she proposes to take undisclosed steps to prevent that. Item. She'll cancel up to $50,000 in college debt for each of 42 million students and former students. When I fed those numbers into my calculator, it made a strange clicking sound and quit. I worked the cost out on paper to be $2.1 trillion, not counting the free college for everyone also included in the proposal. In her previous life as a lawyer, Mrs. Warren was recognized for her work in bankruptcy law. If she's elected, it may come in handy for the country. Item. Of course, she's on board with the climate change narrative. She described herself as excited in a tweet endorsing AOC's Green New Deal abolishing cars, trucks, air travel, and cattle. Observing that it's getting hotter by the minute, Mrs. Warren has concluded that that represents a threat to our military readiness. Again, she doesn't specify how it threatens it, but she'll take steps, quote, to leverage the military's huge energy footprint as a part of our climate solution, unquote. I could be wrong, but I interpret that to mean tapping the Pentagon budget to chill down the planet, and none of this frittering away the money on some stupid border wall project. She earmarks another $2 trillion of taxpayer funds to stimulate clean energy technology, research, and development. Item. Speaking of border walls, a fair and welcoming immigration system is on her agenda. Immigrants are our neighbors and friends, she says, and we need to be capable of differentiating between terrorists and little girls. That's what she said. I'm just quoting her. I presume a bit of sensitivity training for ICE agents is what she has in mind. Item. She calls for a rules-based immigration system that reflects our values. I thought we already had that, except thanks to the Congress to which she has belonged since 2013, we don't enforce it. The phrase open borders appears nowhere in her statements, but I doubt she'd be averse to welcoming in millions more Latin Americans, legally or otherwise, to vote Democrat. It's just a hunch I have. Item. And let's not forget women of color, by which she doesn't mean women of the color white. They're privileged like her, but those with darker skins are victims of systematic discrimination and deserving of a government leg up. Item. On the local level, Mrs. Warren has a groundbreaking YIMBY scheme up her liberal sleeve. YIMBY, Y-I-M-B-Y, stands for Yes in My Backyard. It'll incentivize multifamily housing in neighborhoods zoned against it. That one's just a drop in the fiscal bucket, a mere $10 billion competitive grant program for roads, parks, schools, and infrastructure projects. But to get their mitts on the money, communities will have to reform their land use laws. Mrs. Warren lives in Tony, Cambridge, Massachusetts digs, valued by Zillow at $2.4 million. Whether she stands to gain financially when low-income housing goes in on her block, we can't say. But of course, it won't go in on her block, will it? 2 items complete the review. 1. She intends to strengthen our democracy by making it hassle-free to vote, and no monkeying with the voter rolls to keep them clean and up to date, as required by law. Above all, she means to stop racist voter suppression. Got to drop that word in somewhere. And to do something about the Kremlin's manipulating of our 174,252 distinct voting precincts. 2. She'll propose legislation to enable Congress to indict a president for criminal activity, including obstruction of justice. I thought at first she had Barack Obama in mind retroactively, but then I realized, duh, it was his successor. We need equal justice for everyone, she adds, and not just for plain folks while the rich and powerful get off easy, such as Mrs. Clinton and the cast of characters in the Washington fever swamp who conspired to rig the last election? Wrong again. It's fat cat capitalist tycoons in the Warren crosshairs. For all the forward-looking, feel-good ideas percolating in Mrs. Warren's brain, there's one item missing. There's not a peep about tax increases in her campaign declarations. Bernie Sanders definitely outfoxed her there, which may be why he's in second place and not her. He boasts that there will be higher taxes for everyone. Yeehaw! With the government doling out the proceeds to the most deserving, as determined by the government. Mrs. Warren is a big government liberal, just like Sanders, but I guess she's too ladylike, before the election anyway, to mention something as crass as raising taxes. The Democratic Party has spent 3 decades segregating its base into a welter of victim groups, and Mrs. Warren is doing her best to pander to them all. She's also trying to follow the party line on hatred and obstruction of the president. But how do you keep the far left at a rolling boil and pander to a dozen victim groups, yet speak to the needs of ordinary working and middle-class Democrats while reassuring upper-class Democratic donors? It's a lot of duck pins in the air for an elderly woman who wears bifocals to juggle. One could easily come down and bean her on the belfry. Mr. Biden has the same problem, only from the moderate end of the Democratic spectrum. When all is said and done, probably the best Mrs. Warren can hope for once she knocks out Sanders and Harris is to emerge from the primaries with the offer of VP and heir to the throne beside Mr. Biden. The two can then stroll hand in hand to defeat in 2020 before fading into history as also Rans. There's a happy ending for you if ever there was one. Thanks for watching. Please hit subscribe to support the channel, and we'll see you back here next time when the topic will be liberal logic.